You're listening to The Watchers, show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch
movies about New Jersey.
Movies about New Jersey.
Sorry. It's your turn. We watched a movie about New Jersey.
We watched a really good movie about New Jersey.
We did.
I'm going to start with this. I know in general we usually say, like, watch or don't watch, it's up to you. Mm-hmm. We really get into the nitty-gritty with this one. And and you can watch it. It's easy to watch Flipside online right now. And it's so good. And even if you're not from Jersey, you will love it. I know our listeners are going to love it. So if you haven't watched it yet, pause right now. Go spend an hour and a half or however long it is watching Flipside and then come back because we have such a fun,
and it's like you said, it's not just about Jersey.
No.
Like it's about aging, it's about dreams, it's about creativity, it's about like balancing
nostalgia. So many things we talk about here.
Yeah.
It's also very much about New Jersey.
Yeah. But, you know, I think anybody who is of a certain age, meaning like 30s and later, can kind of relate to that.
Actually, let me reword that. The documentary is definitely about New Jersey to some degree. Our conversation is very much about New Jersey.
I was going to say only in the beginning, but
no, that's not true at all. But it is very much about the documentary. And I think it's really like additive. Like I think we learned a lot about the making of the documentary and Chris Wilcha's approach to it and how he's been thinking about it since. And just so much. He joins us in this episode. We didn't mention that last week because we weren't sure he was going to be able to join us because we emailed him just very short notice and he was so kind and happy to jump on and talk with us.
Yeah. Jersey folks are just down.
That's right. Yeah, totally.
For other Jersey folks.
So yeah, we talked with Chris Wilcha, who is a director and a producer and writer who's been working for decades. He's best known for probably his work on the This American Life the TV series from 2007. His first documentary was a personal documentary about like working in advertising. It was called The Target Shoots First.
At Columbia House. I really want to watch it.
That's right, yeah. He's done a ton of stuff in between. He's Emmy nominated. He won for the This American Life series. He's really talented, really thoughtful guy.
And what else?
What else?
He's from Bergen County.
Oh, and of course he's from Bergen County. You said what else? Like that was going to be like, oh, and he's from Bergen County.
Yeah, you should have. How long have we been working together? And he's from Bergen County.
Right. We got on like gangbusters. He was so fun to talk to. Yeah, I don't know how much more. The one thing, I said the one thing. There are two things I want to set up. I think Chris was a little worried that our conversation isn't the most organized.
Yeah.
But I
think that's perfect.
I think it totally works. I think it's great. Listeners, when I post clips, comment about how you don't mind at all how I don't want to say disorganized, but just it was very go with the flow. It's a really natural conversation. Like it's not really an interview. We had questions for him for sure.
Yeah, but we just talked.
Yeah.
I think I would just say if you're on the fence, let me just read this because I don't think we did much description of this last time.
Right. Yeah, I don't think so either.
When filmmaker Chris Wilcha revisits the record store he worked at as a teenager in New Jersey, he finds the once thriving bastion of music and weirdness from his youth slowly falling apart and out of touch with the times. Flipside documents his tragicomic attempt to revive the store while revisiting other documentary projects he has abandoned over the years. In the process, Wilcha captures This American Life icon Ira Glass in the midst of a creative rebirth, discovers the origin story of David Bowie's ode to a local New Jersey cable television hero who does not need to be named, and uncovers the unlikely connection between jazz photographer Herman Leonard and TV writer David Milch. This disparate collection of stories coheres into something strange and expansive, a moving meditation on music, work, and the sacrifices and satisfaction of trying to live a creative life. So if you're on the fence, that should sell you. Go watch it, take a break, come back.
It's beautiful and it's funny and it's warm and it's thoughtful and it's not sentimental, but it is really loving, like in the subjects that it explores. It's just so good. I think it might be my favorite thing I've seen this year.
But yeah, I think that's really all we need to say. I would definitely say go watch it. It's free on Amazon Prime if you have Amazon Prime. And I think you can also find it a couple of other places. Yeah, so it's free on Amazon Prime if you have Amazon Prime. And then elsewhere, it's between $3.99 and $4.99. So yeah, lots of places.
It's easy to find.
Easy to find, yeah. Flipside documentary. And then come back and listen to us talk to Chris Wilcha.
Chris Wilcha, thank you so much for being here. We're so happy.
Thank you for having me. I'm very flattered that you guys reached out and were interested in chatting. And that you found Flipside.
Yeah, it's all we've been talking about for days. So
I'm thrilled to hear it. I mean, that feels like the thing right now is that word of mouth is sort of all we have. You know, it's a small film and it had a little, you know, theatrical run, but it's like it's very hard in the ocean of stuff to differentiate yourself. And so for somebody to tell somebody else to watch something, it's very meaningful. So thank you guys for checking out the film.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been telling everybody since I watched it. Andrea sent me it via text and was like, Mantzoukas just recommended this. How do we not know about it? And I spent the rest of the day in a rabbit hole, just like, and then we both watched it. And
Does he have any New Jersey connection?
None. He's an asshole.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah,
because I wondered if he had Jersey.
Yeah.
No, and to be honest, he started talking about it, and I pressed pause, went and watched the trailer, and then watched the documentary, and haven't gone back to the episode, so I don't even know how how or why it landed on his radar either. So,
well, he's a music nut,
right?
He's a complete music nut and a record store obsessive. So I think that's probably how he found it.
But anyway, so wait, bring it on. New Jersey, you guys want to dig into New Jersey stuff right away?
So we're going to ask, we've got lots of questions and I want to hear everything about the documentary itself, but so that Jodie can get her yayas out at the top here, I said, Jodie, you can ask 2 unrelated to the documentary North Jersey questions, if that's okay with you, Chris.
I'd be thrilled. I hope I can answer them. I don't know if
you definitely can. You definitely can. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 1.
Yeah.
Goosey night, mischief night, cabbage night. Which one?
Goosey.
Fuck yeah! I told you, Andrea. There's some of us out there. Andrea's insisting that
there are 2 of you.
There's 12 of us. Yeah. No, that's for 3 people, but I don't care. I'm so happy.
Unequivocal. Shaving cream, toilet paper, the whole knocking down mailboxes, fireworks. So that was when we got a little more advanced, but yeah.
This is feeling very Bergen County.
For some reason, mailbox destruction was huge in the suburbs of New Jersey then. I think everyone contractors eventually became aware of this and started to do things with cement and concrete, but we would blow up the mailboxes. We'd smash them up. It was a horrible form of vandalism, but very amusing at the time.
Eggs were really big in my neighborhood.
Eggs.
Yeah. Okay, that's question number 1. Question number 2. So you grew up in Franklin Lakes?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, we'd moved around a bunch, but then that's where I landed, and that's where high school was. And so the primary growing up was Franklin Lakes, yeah.
Okay, so you knew the Elvis house, the Christmas house.
Oh, hell yeah. In fact, that was a pilgrimage.
Every year.
Every year was to go stand in line, essentially, in the cul-de-sac and wait to see should we inform listeners? Because this could be very boring. But basically, one Elvis impersonator who makes his living as an Elvis impersonator, when he would return home from Vegas each year during Christmas, would decorate his house in the most sublime, insane, over the top. And this is like pre-digital. This is like you got to get out there with ladders. And this is not LEDs that you control on your phone. And it was epic. And what it inspired was a kind of neighborhood one-upsmanship where then the neighbors started to do it. And then it became a sort of, nobody could beat him. I mean, he was the sort of beating heart of the Christmas tree competition or the Christmas decoration competition. But then what this created was traffic chaos and Christmas Eve insanity. But and then did he move? He stopped.
Moved. Yeah.
That was it.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because I remember it had a run and it was an annual thing we did, and then boom, it was over.
Yeah, he moved. But that place was legendary. He did the grounds. He had a dancing Elvis on the roof. He played Elvis Christmas carols through speakers. I'm sure some of his neighbors probably hated him, but we used to go every year. And there were firemen with boots out for donations, like walking the line. Oh, it was great.
Can I tell one quick footnote? And I don't want to totally crater this episode.
No.
So every year in Franklin Lakes, Santa, on a Sunday afternoon gets in the fire truck and they make a racket and drive around Franklin Lakes. And one year they didn't do it. And this broke my mother's heart for some reason. She loved the annual. It was like a milestone, a marker that this was the holiday season had begun. And so she wrote to the fire department and said, I was a little crushed that Santa wasn't out this year. You know, what happened? And every year subsequently, Santa stops in front of my mother's house, gets out, rings the doorbell, and greets her and says hello and gives her a hug because she wrote to say how disappointed. So the Franklin Lakes Fire Department has made my mother's decade.
That's beautiful.
So again, we're going Jersey.
We're going Jersey.
Minutia.
I wrote down in my notes that your mom blaming Judd Apatow for you moving to Los Angeles is such a Jersey mom thing.
That's
she was
true.
just like,
so true. She's crushed.
Every time I see any of your work, I just think how you took my son and my grandchildren. I was
but the thing is
perfect.
it's actually real. I mean, it's heartbreaking to me in the sense that, you know, when I lived on the East Coast, I would be in New York or Brooklyn, and I could be out there in, a half hour, 45 minutes. And that was often very helpful with things like childcare or just life or Christmas or, we'd go out on a Sunday and have dinner and then come back. And then when we went to LA, it was like it became once a year that we'd be back. And I think it just really shifted the dynamic. And it's sad.
Hard.
It definitely.
Yeah. I spent a year out there. I lived out there in 2013, 2014. And my mom, I've never seen her happier than when I came back to the East Coast. She was just like, thank God.
Are you in Jersey now or are you in...
Neither of us currently live in Jersey.
Okay, I wasn't sure if there was any...
No. I teach photography, actually, which is another reason that I lost my mind at this documentary. But so much about the documentary, which we should definitely get to instead of just talking about Christmas lights, but was about the balance of living and making art. And I think about it constantly because not only do I have to do that with my work, and I'm still a showing artist, but I have students that come in obsessed with art and I have to figure out what to tell them. So it just was really a very specific trigger for me in a good way to be thinking about. So.
Well, that means a lot. I mean, I will tell you, I showed it to a college class about a month ago in the city, and it was at the New School.
Yeah.
And I kind of went in thinking, oh, God, are they going to have any connection to this? Or is this going to speak to them at all? And I think I was really pleasantly surprised at how they are at this precipice of trying to decide and start and, their lives and their creative lives. And they saw this person reflecting on and talking about the perils of that. And they really identified with it in a way that I did not expect. I think, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I think I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't just some Gen X thing. It actually sort of said something to a young person who's trying to be creative and make a living and by the way, the marketplace of everything is just collapsing. I mean, publishing, nonfiction film, I mean, all of it. And it's not just the AI of it all. It's everything. So I had a very intense conversation with these kids that I didn't really expect to have, and I don't have the answers because I still am trying to figure this out. This isn't.
We all are.
It's not like I have this cushy gig. It's like I'm still a freelancer. It's still job by job, year by year. And there's no coasting, and I felt like I didn't want to be like, the Grim Reaper, Grim Employment Reaper telling them everything's awful, but it was tricky,
Yeah.
There's not a question here. And this isn't even, you're just making me think of like the younger folks who have lived their lives online. They also understand like memory and archive in I think an even more immediate way because they are documenting everything all the time. And I wonder what the difference is though, because it is sort of, it feels boundless on their end in a way it didn't for me, even just going back to like, the little disposable camera, how many, pictures you could take then as opposed to you have what can fit in your phone and in the cloud. But it still is something I think they're really thinking about. And it's in some ways is maybe even more curated in the opposite direction because they are, I think, so thoughtful about what they're presenting in a lot of ways. And there's not a question there necessarily, but that overlap is interesting.
I teach a course about the intersection of photography with archives and race. And I'm teaching it right now. And I've been talking about archives with my students constantly. And they're thinking about it. They're thinking about the digital like abyss that they're putting all of their lives into. And I just had a sabbatical and I've been scanning my own photographic archive of 35 years. And so I'm in it too. And I'm talking to them about how they keep things versus how I've kept things in boxes and negative binders. And, and it is something that they think about a lot because they've grown up in this time where everything feels like you make it and then it's gone unless it's a physical object that you can hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
no, and I have to say, like, there's a persistent low grade terror I feel about backing up and all this stuff that I've accumulated. I have these obsolete. I mean, I could give you a horrifying tour of hard drive
jazz
hell.
drives.
I have them all, and I'm literally often going on Amazon trying to find like a dongle or a cord that doesn't exist anymore, I mean, yeah, I don't want to embarrass myself.
No, I have a closet of hard drives too. I get that.
But we're getting to like stability issues of some of these and then like figuring out it's terabytes of shit and it's like overwhelming. But then I also think, for instance, of my kids, their texts, for instance, like comprise so much of their lives, yet they're not consciously backing those up. And that correspondence I could just see disappearing with a phone if they go to, Android or so, you know what I mean? Like it could all just go poof. And it's years of their lives. It's gigabytes of correspondence and conversation and memory. And I don't think they're meticulous, backer-uppers.
I think about, there's a box of letters from like high school boyfriends in my closet behind me, right? And theirs are all on text messages. So
and I still the tactility of some of that stuff I still love, like these old photos or letters or correspondence. I saved it, I saved it. So
did making the documentary, I'm going to assume for our listeners, we told you last week that you should go watch Flipside. If you haven't yet, I think you should probably pause, go watch it and come back because you're going to love it. And also I don't want us to have to like shy away from asking certain questions.
Right.
And especially with the way this narrative is structured, it's like, I don't know how you talk about one part of it without talking about all the parts of it. And so there is, a moment toward the end of the film where you are cataloging all of these items in a way because you're getting ready to sell them. Did it? Yeah. It feels in the documentary like the answer might be yes, but true. Does it actually? Do you feel freer? Do you feel like it's easier to let go of these things now? Or,
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, in full truth, not everything was purged, of course, because a lot of it I kept for various reasons.
There's some really cool T-shirts in there that your son got his hands on.
I think what I'm trying to figure out now is there was a long time where I got immense pleasure by keeping it and then revisiting it occasionally. And what I think is slightly unnerving now is it's starting to just be reminders of how much time has passed.
Yeah.
So it's changing meaning. Yeah. And I think that's what's throwing me a little bit, that it isn't just as simple as it was. Like I'll find, a magazine or a piece of clothing and like, I start to realize truly like that's now like 35 years ago. Like it's not like, oh, that's this band I liked in high school. Like all of a sudden the passage of time feels so profound. And I think that I want to figure out this thought that I'm about to say, but stick with me for a second. Yeah. I think that often my accumulation of things, especially like I'd go to a garage sale and I'd find some archive. We're just talking about archives of photographs or old home movies. And they all held the possibility of being the raw material to make something out of it. And so I would accumulate it as if it was like stuff that I was going to make projects of. And I think what's also slightly heartbreaking now is like my time is more finite, right? I'm starting to think about, the future and the back nine.
Of course.
And that my life is not just some open-ended possibility that, I might be a photographer. I might be a chef. I might also, I'm doing this documentary thing, but I might also be a helicopter pilot.
Right.
Like there was this sense for a number of years that everything was possible. Every project could be made. Even books slightly overwhelm me right now where I'm like, I probably should not buy another book because
I know.
really, truly, am I going to read the ones I even already have? Like,
Right.
So I think I'm having a more complicated experience of saving now in a way that is, there's more sadness that goes along with it. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. Well, Herman Leonard says it himself in the documentary.
Yeah.
My heart broke, and I never related to something more than when he said he never shot enough, because I've been looking through these binders of old photos, and the only thought I have is, why isn't there more?
Yeah.
There's so many missed people and moments and years, and as someone with the bit with my mother's dealing with memory issues right now, and thinking about that in relationship to those images as well, right? It's like photography and memory, as the philosophers have talked about the two connection of the two for 100 years. And so, I just felt like this was ticking every box for my brain.
That was a big thing that emerged in the making that I didn't quite go in knowing or considering, that memory and the loss of memory and the preservation of memory would be such a sort of significant part of the story. So, and my mind goes to David Milch hiring me to document this jazz photographer named Herman Leonard. And I hope our listeners watch the film and will understand this. I always feel bad talking about the things someone hasn't seen, but so he hires me to go document this photographer, and he doesn't really tell me that it's not really probably supposed to result in anything other than the act of a tribute to this man by lavishing him with the attention of a documentary crew as he's in his dying days, to have some people show up and go, "You're significant. We want to photograph you. We want to film you. We want to tell your story." Now, it's beautiful, but then he dies, and there's really not enough material for a film. And I'm telling him this, and he's sort of like, "Oh, no, that was never really the point. The point was," so there was this act of performance art. But then later, cut to, almost 10 years later, we go to visit David Milch, whose memory is now disappearing in real time.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And we are going and shooting him and lavishing him with the same attention of a documentary film crew. And he actually, I could tell that day, was kind of enjoying our presence because we were asking questions, we were curious, we were there. But he didn't remember me, and he didn't even remember Herman, who he had commissioned this from and was a friend of his. And so then there's this moment, which is one of the ones that still kind of hits me, when David's wife is talking about this act of being seen and this, and how meaningful that is to truly see a person and give them that attention and that to hear them and to acknowledge them and to spend time with them. And there we were doing that now for David. So that was sort of a profound loop closing moment in the documentary.
Yeah. It's so beautiful and profound, and it's also something that has emerged for Jodie and I as we've been covering. I mean, we picked up one documentary to cover, and then we just kind of got obsessed with talking about the genre, and how every time we add another one to the mix, this bigger conversation unfolds. And a big thing we've gotten to talk to a couple of the people behind a couple of the documentaries we've covered, and a big part of the conversation is the story you set out to tell versus the one that gets told, and the tension between those two things, and kind of when you need to get out of your own way versus not. And I just wonder, when did you realize the story you were telling was maybe a little different than the one you set out for, and how did those pieces fit together for you?
This is a weird movie or documentary to talk about because I think it's a completely non-traditional thing. It's not like we pitched it and had a small budget and went and followed a subject around and came back and edited. I think there was this So, I'll just sort of quickly summarize that the film is comprised of footage of projects that I attempted to make and failed for different reasons, right? Either money fell through, or the person didn't want to participate anymore, or maybe I lost my creative will to make it. But there's all these unfinished projects. But it's in returning to this record store that I worked at in high school that I kind of have this moment of time travel, and it inspires me to start sifting through these old archives. And I think that I initially felt like the store, I knew there wasn't a full documentary there. So what we did, though, is with this editor that I've been collaborating with for a long time, we, started assembling the record store footage.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would sort of come in and bring other things. And I'd be like, I have this Ira Glass footage of this documentary that just never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that. And so we would kind of start building little pods and modules out of the material, out of the unfinished projects. And then we'd start to sort of identify and talk about themes that were echoing between them. And then I think a breakthrough moment was when we realized, and it was with my editor's help, a guy named Joe Beshenkovsky, and there was a woman we worked with before that named Claire Ave-Lamont, was that we realized that we could break these things up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is could you have a character appear and then have that person go away and then reappear later? And could they be carrying a certain theme, or could they be helping kind of propel the narrative engine with their story? But it was also sort of like subtly my story too. So it was kind of like memoir disguised as documentary interview, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Herman did a lot of that. He ends up being kind of this guru floating over the whole thing, this jazz photographer, Herman Leonard. And so I think that was a big moment when we realized that that it wasn't just going to be this kind of kitchen sink thing, that like we could make the disparate parts and the unfinished projects start to work together and echo each other and carry different themes. And I think that was kind of an editorial breakthrough when that started. And then it was like experimenting with structure and being like, where does David Bowie go? Is he the ending?
Right.
Is Herman the ending when he dies? Well, and then, by the way, Uncle Floyd.
We could talk all day about Uncle Floyd.
I mean, trust me, I would have loved. I will tell you, a more ambitious version in my head at one point I had, which was delusional. But I was thinking this should be a serialized show, so a series, and you do a half hour. So you'd have a Milch episode, an Uncle Floyd episode. But the problem is anyone I talked to or pitched was like, I don't get it. Right.
It's disparate people.
What connects these things? And on paper, it was very hard to pitch it. Like I have a treatment, but it's like, it was just like it. And people would say, oh, it's a really interesting treatment. And it seems like very vivid, but I just don't see how it's going to work. And then there came this moment where we're like, we just have to make the thing.
Yeah.
You just have to go out and assemble it and make it.
Yeah.
So this was one of those cases. So
the individual other docs become like threads that hold it together. They kind of come and go. Like Uncle... I mean, as someone who grew up in Bergen County in the 80s, like Uncle Floyd.
Bergen County.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I never told you that before. I've never mentioned it one time. But like Uncle Floyd, I mean, such a huge part of my growing up. And, Andrea and I were talking. So tell me,
you clocked Uncle Floyd. You were aware of him as a character and as a kind of.
Never been unaware of Uncle Floyd in my life. He's always
because
been...
you have to understand, there are people who did not grow up in the tri-state area who this is the first time.
Sure?
No, I swear to God. I mean, I
know. I can't believe it.
Well, that's what I was saying before. Not to get too sentimental, because it's easy for me to do so. But before we started recording, before you even joined us, Chris, like Jodie and I were talking about how like it's. Oh, I might get.
I know it's okay. Andrea cries a lot.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I have full eyes. It's So
I'm very flattered that you are moved to tears.
Yeah,
she told me she cried a couple of times.
I think 3 good cries. Uncle Floyd had a stroke in June of 2023, and he's still.
Did you read about that? Like, how did you find out about that? I'm just curious because I wasn't sure how.
Very tapped in.
Very tapped into the Uncle Floyd universe. I follow This Was the Uncle Floyd Show Facebook group, and our New Jersey's a World podcast. Like at one point early on, we reached out.
Tried
our friend Chris Gethard is an Uncle Floyd obsessive, and that's the thing too, is we were talking about, I'm sorry that this is a little chaotic, but
no, please.
One of the other kind of like recurring threads that I really love is the idea of these sort of like, sometimes you've got to make the commercials, and that's fine, and that's good, honest work. And Uncle Floyd was good, still until last year, doing the fairs and the beef and beers and the all of that. And like, but he doesn't say yes to everything.
Yeah.
he will say no. So it's, the fact that you got him, that's
its own success, right?
Yeah.
Being able to continue working in that way for your whole life,
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've always known who Uncle Floyd was, and he went to Glen Rock High School, as did his whole family. So that's where I went to high school. It's something that I have no right to take any pride in, but I do.
I have to say a breakthrough moment for me, and this is relatively recent. One of the sometimes when you're doing commercial work, there's not that satisfaction of like when it's in the world, you get no feedback.
Right.
Nobody gives a shit. If anything, people probably fast forwarded through it or didn't watch it or avoided it, And, again, you're making a living and that's okay. But one of the funny things about Flipside was you put it in the world and you don't know what's going to echo back. And one of the moments that was really striking, and this was only a couple months ago, was I got a phone call from a New Jersey area code that I didn't recognize, and it was Uncle Floyd's brother, Jerry. So these guys are East Coast musician legends, and I was completely aware of their tenure on the Conan show, and that, they're like, I am very aware. I follow Jimmy on Instagram, because I'm like a guitar nerd, but it was so meaningful and moving that he went and saw it in Montclair, right? So in New Jersey, and he was really moved by it, and they're obviously dealing with Floyd's health issues, and I think it just hit at a moment that had such unexpected significance, I think, in a way, in their lives. And then for him to call me directly was like so, I don't know, it was one of those moments where you're just like, that's,
But that's why you pay that
incredible.
attention to people, right? That's why you point the camera at them. That's why you let them be themselves in front of the camera, so that their brother can post-stroke see the heightened version or the most Uncle Floyd, standing in a record store playing jingles.
And by the way, that was always a documentary thing of mine, was this idea that everything's disappearing, right? And that's part of why I was hoarding things, and I would save things like newspaper articles, and because I just felt like it was going to disappear, it was going to go away, it was going to be forgotten. And I felt like Floyd. I just felt this sense of like, I have to capture this. And of course, what we now know is that I may actually have captured like a peak moment of Floyd, that I don't know that Floyd is coming back, you know what I mean? 100%. And so that, like from a documentary perspective, I'm like, that was an accidental gift of shooting with him and just being persistent and bugging him and trying to get him to come to the record store and shoot with him. And then another moment where it was made clear to me about how you have to do things because stuff changes and shifts and disappears also was that I was doing this for so long that there came a point where I had shot with Uncle Floyd and I was poking, I could never gather enough time to get momentum with the edit of Flipside because I'd be working, right? So paid jobs would always take over. I couldn't pay an editor. But I had this idea one day where I was like, oh shit, we should get David Bowie to come out to Flipside and do a duet of Slip Away where Uncle Floyd plays the piano. This to me was going to be like the final scene where the hair on the back of your neck and maybe, and I thought to myself, I had this moment where I was like, ask the universe. Like every once in a while, some weird thing happens and somebody sees that it's an interesting, beautiful idea. And maybe and I thought to myself, we'll get him a service car and all he has to do is come out to New Jersey for like 3 hours and we'll have him back home. And, so anyway, I bugged every person I knew in the music business. And I did eventually get to an email of someone in the management. And I wrote this heartfelt letter. And sure enough, the person actually responded. And they said, David loves Uncle Floyd. Of course he remembers Uncle Floyd. Because he used to go see him live. There are photos I found online of him at an Uncle Floyd show.
Amazing.
And he wrote Slip Away about him.
Yeah, of course.
And he said, but David's just not doing anything in public right now. And then 6 months later, he was dead.
Yeah.
And so had I had that idea, had I acted on it sooner, I don't know, maybe we could have gotten him in a different moment. But it's sort of, again, it's this reminder as my documentary instincts to act on them, to not say, you know what, man, I'll shoot that in a year, or maybe I'll get to that later. Like I try really, if I'm feeling something, even if there's no money, I try to go do the thing because I still believe that, it's all fleeting and disappearing and changing, and it's worth preserving and documenting sometimes. So
I tell my students, I've never regretted having the camera on me. I've only regretted not having it on me, you know?
Exactly.
And, you know, Andrea, can you indulge me for a moment with the, okay, so we've been talking about archives and saving and collecting, and I just gave a talk at my university, which I'm not going to give right now, don't worry, about archives, because that's what I'm dealing with. And in doing so, I referenced two artists specifically, but one of which is Andy Warhol. And I wanted to know, are you familiar with the piece by Warhol, The Philosophy of Andy Warhol from A to Band and Back Again?
I have the hardcover.
Okay. That makes me so happy, because when he talks about...
I went to Pittsburgh and made the pilgrimage to the museum. I mean, how deep you want to go here? Yes.
Oh, no, I'm so happy because...
Jodie, can you share the quote with our listeners, though? Because they're going to flip out.
I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's too long, but I'll read one little bit of it that is the thing that sent me over the edge. He says, I believe that everyone should live in one big empty space. It can be a small space as long as it's clean and empty. I like the way of rolling everything up and locking it away in cupboards, but I wouldn't even have the cupboards because that's hypocritical. But if you can't go all the way and you really feel you need a closet, then your closet should be a totally separate piece of space so you don't use it as a crutch too much. If you live in New York, your closet should be at the very least in New Jersey. Aside from the false dependency, another reason for keeping your closet at a good distance from where you live is that you don't want to feel that you're living next door to your own dump. He's saying don't save anything, but then he says what you should do is, and this is what he did with the time capsules, as you know, what you should do is get a box for a month and drop everything in it, and at the end of the month, lock it up. Then date it and send it over to New Jersey. You should try to keep track of it, but if you can't and you lose it, that's fine, because it's one less thing to think about, another load off your mind. I could not stop thinking about this quote when I was watching your documentary. I was like, this is such kismet that I just have been talking about this obsessively at work. And your closet in New Jersey, you had Andy Warhol's closet in New Jersey.
I have never heard that quote. I don't remember, again, having read the book 100 years ago, but that is incredible.
Yeah, the whole thing is perfect.
Tell you, I totally thought of and identified with the time capsules, because that's what I would do. And what's so fun now when I do sift through my own banker's boxes and weirdness is the stuff that made it in there. And I'm not talking about the obvious stuff, like something that feels like it has some relative value. I'm talking like I would write away to like Twin Tone Records to get catalogs for the Replacements, or I would, I have a Van Halen fan newsletter or a WPLJ credit card. I have so much New Jersey and my fanhood, but all that stuff is just radiating with meaning, and it would have been so easy to have just tossed it or thrown it away, or so I totally identify with that. And by the way, I remember one of the things I found in a used bookstore that I still have are the catalogs for the Warhol auction, which were utterly fascinating because they told a story of his accumulating and hoarding. And, he was a cookie jar collector, he was a jewelry collector. Plus he had an astonishing collection of fine art of stuff that he traded with people or been given, and it was just to see his own high-low obsessions.
Yes.
Was fascinating because it told the story of, it was part of his practice. His art practice was his accumulating,
Well, and I connected it to your dad.
Totally.
I feel like your dad is like,
that's his own archive.
Andy Warhol of Franklin Lakes.
True.
Like, I mean, my dad was the same way. My dad collected stamps. He collected like little toy antique cars. He coins. His dad worked in the stamp and coin business in Ramsey. Like there's just, and you can blame it on the generation maybe, but like my dad wasn't a Depression kid. He was a World War II kid. So it's just, I very much enjoyed your parents. Like your parents were very delightful to watch on screen.
That's nice to hear. And I think they would be very flattered to hear that. I mean, I think they were very nervous about participating in any way. And I remember I invited them to the premiere in Toronto, and they came, which was so beautiful. Aww. But they were nervous. I mean, they were a little bit like, are we about to get roasted in some, and they do get a little, there's that playful parenting thing. Yeah. But I think for the most part, my dad's saying things that I think are really interesting and relate to all the themes and the accumulating, and his collections are, he will throw out nothing.
Yeah.
Every time I go home, I find some vein of something that just, and it's always like, I was was just there, like a month or two ago, and like I just found like all this weird skiing stuff and tennis stuff, and it just the hair on the back of my neck. You know what I mean? Like there was this thing called a ski tote, which you used to put your skis in. It has this 70s looking font, and I was like, this object just brought me back to like in high school. We used to go on Saturdays. There was a ski thing through the high school where you'd go up to Hunter Mountain and you'd have your freaking ski tote or whatever. And the whole thing is insane. Yeah, but it just it took me right back to like being on that bus on Saturday, hot and disgusting after skiing, and you know what I mean, like it was like this time capsule memory machine. So but anyway, I feel like I didn't mean to totally digress, but parents are still they're still at it. I think my dad is thinking about what to do with the stuff. And what's funny is I have a very unsentimental sibling, my sister, and if she had her druthers, she would roll up there with a dumpster and just purge everything and be done with it while they're alive. Like that's her desire.
Yeah.
And we just had some family, I don't want to say like strain, but we had a little bit of a fight, a little tense moment, because it was my dad's 80th birthday. And my big idea was that I was going to digitize his Super 8 collection. And I did it, and it cost me a fortune because I found a guy who does it, and it's a really labor-intensive thing. And this guy did a beautiful job, and I digitized all these films. And the thing is we stopped watching them in recent years because the projector broke and the bulb wasn't available anymore. It just became impossible. And she literally was like, you should have digitized 3 of them and thrown the rest away. And I was like, are you out of your fucking mind? And then I started looking at them. And what's so beautiful about them being digitized is they're now QuickTimes that you can scrub frame by frame really quickly. Yeah. And I would find these moments where my parents would be like reflected in a mirror in the background, or just a moment of like my mother walking out of the World's Fair in 1960, whatever. And so I started to take stills of them.
Yes,
and I
so
printed
cool.
the stills and I made a book of the stills. And it's like, I'm finding it, talking about an archive that is ever generating new novel ways to engage it. Because I still think all the mistakes are beautiful, all the scratched film, all the light leaks. Like I've been obsessing on they're almost like these abstract paintings unto them. So anyway, I have found this totally renewable creative resource. And my sister was like, I'm not paying you. I'm not sharing this expense with you.
I literally was scanning I'm going through and printing all of my images for my show in February. And one of the things I'm realizing is that when I was shooting in college, the foot of my tripod shows up in a number of photos. And I fucking love it. It's my favorite part. It's the fact that like, it's evidence that I was there with a friend creeping around some abandoned mental hospital in New Jersey. Like, totally, and so those mistakes are everything. Overbrook. That's where we all went.
My thing was, toxic waste sites, Superfund sites. So one narrative that didn't make it into, this was actually a whole chapter that did not make it into Flipside, but the town of Pompton Lakes is a Superfund site. So there was a munitions factory in Pompton Lakes that made literally the bombs and bullets for like wars for the last 100 years. And they would dump stuff into the water and into the land and they blow shit up. Actually, right across the street from Flipside, it's called Cannonball Road, and it takes you to the DuPont plant. And they, of course, left, and literally there's like a cancer cluster. It's a shit show. But the problem is then I would have been trying to turducken in another almost like dark PBS-like story about the town and the people and real estate and this company, They shifted the liability to another LLC and split. You know what I mean? It's creepy, and it was going to eat the whole thing alive. So I had to put that aside. But that was a New Jersey thing for me too. There's like one in Sayreville. Like it was very easy to find these places that had been poisoned by industry. Yep. And of course, what the fuck am I doing marching around and hiking on them and taking photos? Because, I am breathing the heinous forever chemicals that reside there. But anyway, so that was a popular pastime for me too, was looking around toxic waste sites in New Jersey.
I told Andrea this at the end of your movie, when your very last line, I fist pumped, because literally in my apartment, when you say like, or maybe I'll finish it. I don't know the exact line, but
I could finish it.
Right.
I wrote it down.
I literally texted her afterwards. I was like, I just fist pumped in my house because the whole point to me of watching that and listening to all of these people that were like, not all of these people, but a lot of people that were close to the end of their creative careers. Every single one just kept, especially Herman Leonard talks about, you just do it.
Yeah.
You just keep doing it, you know? And that is really my general life philosophy. And it just felt very affirming to watch it and hear that.
Well, and I have to be totally honest, like, I am really thinking about right now, like, for instance, even the commercial work, which is named in the documentary as like a job that maybe isn't the most desirable. Truth be told, like, that's disappearing. Like that, the economy of commercials is dying. No one makes commercials in the traditional 30-second, 60-second. I mean, they do, but it's pharma commercials and there's a lot less work. There's a lot less stuff to do. And I'm having these moments where I'm thinking a lot about like what is next, how to pivot. Like Flipside, Flipside is not making anyone any money. I mean, I'm thrilled I did it, and that was never the point. But like, I wondered at one point, is there a way that this could help? Could this get bought in a way that could propel the next thing? And the truth is no. Like, this stuff is so devalued unless you're a true crime or sports documentary or celebrity-driven thing. Like, that's the trifecta for the streamers, right? They're not interested in like essays about midlife creative failure. You know what I mean? Like, that's not spiking the algorithm.
Right.
And I think that the thing just related to what you were saying is I feel like the only way out of it is to just keep making stuff and figuring out how to create your way out of it. I mean, it's unnerving and it's a little scary, but that's what I'm trying to do. So
I have to believe that everything is a pendulum swing and will eventually settle in the middle somewhere, and I'm not just saying this because you're here in front of us, but I hope that like this work in particular is kind of proof of that like Jodie already said it, but it is that over and over again of like, just keep showing up and keep doing it. And I'm kind of taking I know we're being a little more in our heads here, but I just have a kind of related, more concrete question
go for it.
Watching it opening credits, I see this is a project about, you said failed projects, so I'll say failed projects. But I think we could, there are more generous ways to think about those works, but you don't have to be generous about your own work. So, failed projects, but we know we're watching a documentary that has been finished, so I know there's going to be an ending. But I still feel the tension while watching it and wondering how that's going to happen. And did you think about that consciously as you were working through something you wanted to keep that as a way to keep people moving through it, or?
Yeah, well, I think something that I talked about with the editor, this guy, Joe Beshenkovsky, and then a friend of mine who's like a Swiss Army knife. His name is Adam Goldman, and he helped co-write it, but he also did the music. I mean, this is the indie filmmaking model, right? Of just like getting your friends and making something.
Yep.
Also, Swiss Army knife is the best compliment you can give somebody.
Oh my God. If somebody said that to me, I'd be so excited.
I know.
Yeah.
This guy is multi-talented. He's a great writer. He's a great musician. And these are not even the ways that he's making his living. But I think what we were interested in was you literally do not know what the fuck is happening next, and you don't quite know. And then there comes a point where it's starting to accumulate. And then by the end, the last puzzle piece is like, can I make this? But I'd have to finish it. And then boom, like literally the director credit is like a plot point. You know what I mean? Like that's like the last puzzle piece And I think what was great about showing in theaters, which was a very brief window of a couple of weeks where we had a modest theatrical run. But what was fun about being at those things is you'd be sitting in a room with the people and you'd feel the energy of that ride unfolding. Like, what is Ira Glass? Like, what? Like David Milch. And then, and I think that was really fun. That like, is the trigonometry of this, can we pull it off? The high wire act of like holding all these things in balance. And again, one of the things we were trying to figure out in making it was like, calibrating how much I appear in it. I mean, trust me, I was very worried at different moments. Does anyone really want to hear the midlife musings of some dude from New Jersey? Like, maybe not, and like, I think that at one point I overcorrected and I wasn't in it as much. And then certain people were like, you gotta be more vulnerable. You gotta like We need
Yeah.
like your family, like you got to say some shit. And
Yeah.
it was a note that I took seriously, and I felt it intuitively too. But that's why I sort of like eased back in. And, you know, and I don't know if I struck the right balance, but I felt like what was helpful and meaningful was that these other characters could help carry some of the big ideas. It wasn't just everything did not reside with me as the narrator, that it was, there's Tracy, you know, my high school
she's great.
flame, and there's
Yeah, she's
Herman, and there's, you know, these people come in and out and then, you know, Milch and Milch's wife, like they're all, and then by the way, Judd Apatow ends up being sort of an MVP. Like he comes in and lands the plane a few times on some big ideas that were really helpful about
it's
creativity and nostalgia and
good shit.
yeah, if all your shit is awesome.
Yeah.
So I think that helped take the burden off of it just being like one person's, you know, midlife crisis.
And to be fair, though, that one person, that's such a specific, like, it's not going to appeal to everyone. Nothing does, right?
Yeah.
But there's a generation of us, and the bookends of that generation, who are in a moment where we just went through a giant pandemic. We're taking stock. Our parents are aging or leaving us, right?
Yeah.
I don't have children, but a lot of people are raising kids with older parents to take care of as well. And thinking about what your legacy is happens at this time of life. And so it's including yourself in it, to me, wasn't necessarily, I can understand why it would be uncomfortable, but at the same time, without that, it doesn't have as much specificity, and they're like to a generation and to a time of life that everyone will go through if they're lucky, you know?
Yeah.
And without that, I think it loses the emotional poignancy of seeing your children and your wife and your parents all in this extended family, and thinking about what their legacy is for you and what your legacy is for your children. You know, it really, I think it was important to be in there.
It feels like you're there where you need to be. This is another thing that we talk about week to week is I won't say which documentary, one of the documentaries we covered, there is somebody who is in it in a way where they said that they were, they didn't want to be, but they are very much in it. And it feels like they maybe don't need to be.
Yeah.
It's like
little much.
And it's fine. It's your movie. You can be in it as much as you want.
I still enjoyed it.
To contrast that, though, Sav Rogers, who did Chasing Amy, he ended up being the star of that documentary unintentionally.
And it works.
It began as something else and shifted into this other story that's way more about him than what he thought it was going to be. And it's beautiful, and it's one of my favorite things I've seen this year. And so I think that if you're there for the right reasons and as much as you need to be, like, and you totally are in this one.
When we interviewed him, he had the same reservations you did. He was like, I wasn't sure if I should be a part of this, but the personal touch of caring about him as a person and his family and his story and allowing us to live through his eyes was really important. So, and that's how I felt, especially, I mean, I could not have, I would have missed hearing your mom's Jersey accent so much if it was not in there. I loved it. You have a very Jersey mom, and that is a high compliment.
Oh, yeah. No, she's
a high compliment.
I don't know that she would have wanted to be in Jersey quite as long as she has been. I think maybe in her mind there was going to be some other chapter, but she's still holding it down. But you just reminded me, you guys were talking about Kevin Smith. The one thing that's remarkable about him, and I don't know all the details, but he has somehow really, the way he found that he cultivated an audience and then figured out how to make things for that audience and to include that audience and to monetize that in a not a creepy way. And like, it's kind of remarkable that he kind of, you know, stepped outside the system and invented his whole thing and his infrastructure and his podcasts. I mean, he is really, you know, a model for responding against the ridiculous, you know, Hollywood hegemony or whatever. But anyway, fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, even the theater itself is a good example of that, because that's the theater he grew up going to as a kid. He bought it, and now, you know, they host live events, and they have found other ways.
I feel like I read something where he was like, it's expensive to run a movie theater because movies, people do not go see. We've been trained not to go see them in the theater now, and it's heartbreaking.
I will say, having never seen Clerks in the theater, but watching it a million times at home, actually seeing it in a movie theater in Kevin Smith's movie theater, like on the big screen, was amazing. I noticed so many things I hadn't seen watching it on a crappy television in my parents' house, you know?
Yeah.
So
no, I hear you.
Yeah. It's the positive part of me is hoping that that's another example of something we'll come back around to. Because kids are going crazy for Wicked. I know that. Everybody's seeing Wicked. So maybe it'll trickle down to
my film and darkroom class has a waiting list every semester because they want to make physical prints in a darkroom.
So that's a great sign.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, whoa. Can we have a New Jersey moment?
Anytime, all the time.
Okay. Have you guys, because this goes to show you the obsessive, ridiculous layers I was piling onto Flipside. But at one point, I wanted to include a chapter that Michael Jackson briefly lived in Franklin Lakes. Do you know this story?
I know that he did, because that's like, there's that section of New Jersey in that Franklin Lakes, Upper Saddle River, and all the way up to Alpine area where famous people tend to land briefly. And sometimes they stay and sometimes they don't.
But this was a little weirder than that, because first of all, I remember in Wyckoff, there was one fancy Italian restaurant called Aldo's.
Yes.
And a feature of Aldo's was that you'd stand in the waiting area and it was photographs of Aldo with celebrities. And it was kind of like, at that time, I didn't quite understand what an obnoxious flex it was to like line your waiting room with random photos of you and celebrities, but there would always be like a bunch of Michael Jackson shots, and it was always kind of random. And apparently Aldo was like friends with Michael Jackson in Michael Jackson's darker later days. So I don't know if he like had kids yet, but he was in not a great place.
Mm-hmm.
He befriended this family and they invited him to live in their house. So this was not Michael renting a house in New Jersey. He came and lived with a family.
I did not know.
And that family, and he lived there and he was like hiding out in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey.
Perfect.
And here's the creepy part though, and I need to unpack this, and it's probably worthy of it would have been a great chapter of Flipside, but again, the thing was going to collapse in on itself.
Was it the Elvis house?
It wasn't far, but they apparently had a son who was interested in music, and they like recorded some stuff, like, Michael hanging out in the basement recording some stuff. And then, of course, creepy upon creepy, I have a memory of after he dies, this family starts doing like interviews in media and may have even like released the song. Mm-hmm. So, of course, like you can't not be a vampire when it comes to this guy. Like they couldn't help themselves. And I think they were like well-intentioned, but yet then they were like publicizing the association after he was dead. And
oh my God.
Anyway, but I still think about Michael Jackson exiled in one of those New Jersey winters where the leaves are all gone and it's like dark at 3:50, and it's just kind of like that grim, cold, biting. Like that is not Neverland Ranch. You know what I mean?
I was just going to say that exact same thing.
Santa Barbara County. That is like, you know, weird, kind of like Nowheresville, you know? Like it's not New York. It's not, you know. So anyway, I always wanted to unpack the connection between Michael Jackson and Franklin Lakes.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I haven't heard that story.
Nixon lived in Upper Saddle River. Like,
that's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, actually, didn't Bjork live in Alpine for a hot minute? Yes. I remember her and Matthew Barney were
I believe so, yeah.
Over the water for, you know.
Yep.
It wasn't all, New York City and
Alpine's like
high-end
the
real estate.
place, right? I think like Jay-Z
and I know
had a
Alpine's
house in Alpine,
fancy.
Right?
Yeah.
It was less so when we were young, though. It was fancy, but it wasn't like a celebrity haven. It was like notable.
Well, Eddie Murphy, I remember hearing Eddie Murphy.
True. Eddie Murphy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stephen Colbert lives in Jersey. This could just be like us listing people that live in Jersey.
Let's spin off a podcast of just New Jersey real estate and residents. Yeah. And toxic waste sites and insane asylums. Abandoned insane asylums. Although, is that weird, New Jersey? You guys obviously know weird.
So Chris was involved with Weird New Jersey, which is like how I found Chris in the first place. And it's a big like corkboard with pins and red string.
That's another reason this documentary makes so much sense and feels so, again, right up my Jodie's alley. Always, of course. Good work. That feels like such a Jersey thing to me. I want to make every unique and interesting thing such a Jersey thing. That's my most toxic trait. But that like how, if you take a little time to think about something like that, like how connected everything ends up being, even if you don't realize at first. And that's the Jersey of it all, big time. Like
Well, because I worked at the Barnes & Noble on 17 in Paramus, and that's where I would get my copies of Weird New Jersey, because I could see them as soon as they walked in the door, and I'd make sure to grab one.
Well, and the record store, Station One, is that what it's?
Yeah.
Station Records.
The competing record store.
The shot over his shoulder is all the Weird New Jersey
That's
magazines.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
it's true. Yeah, he's got the. Well, I think those guys actually come in. I don't even think they have a distributor there, and they just show up, and they actually drop them off at Flipside too, but they sit a little longer at Flipside, I fear. But by the way, Ridgewood, there was a movie theater in Ridgewood that I think was closed, right? And the Ridgewood bookstore, I would go to that movie theater, and then I remember they had one bin in the bookstore of punk rock records, and that's where I bought like Suicidal Tendencies and Husker Du. Like I didn't even know some of the purchases before I got them, but the artwork was so compelling, and that was someone at that store had a clue, like was curating a little bit. You know what I mean? So
Ridgewood had a weird. It's like for people that don't know, it's a very wealthy town and it's a very preppy town, but it also had this like seedier, like punk side.
My Ridgewood memory was that I would sneak into New York City and not tell my parents. And so I would get the train in Ridgewood, go to Hoboken, then from Hoboken to Manhattan. And they wouldn't know that I was at like CBGB's.
Yeah.
And then I would like come home and they'd be like, oh, were you they would think I was at Rob Ferris's house,
right.
In his basement watching like the Johnny Carson show or whatever.
Right.
And we were like sneaking into the city, which was, I look back now and it's like sort of harrowing to consider how many stupid, idiotic things we did.
Especially in the early 90s, because I was doing that too. We were usually driving in, but we would sneak in and like walk around St. Mark's and feel very cool and punk, That was kind of our vibe.
Yeah.
Go to Jaffa Cafe and drink coffee at like 10 o'clock at night.
Is Jaffa still open?
I don't think so.
East Village, yeah.
I don't think so.
See, it's all going away. It's all disappearing.
I know. We got to save everything. We've got to save all of the matchbooks and the soaps.
Yeah, I know. See, but I'm trying not to be that guy either, honestly. Like, I have moments with preservation stuff. Like, I'll get these emails from like, we must save this building. We must. And part of me lately has been like, do we? Maybe not. Like, maybe not. Like, maybe we don't need, like, by the way, I'm in a small office space that I am renting, and it was a COVID thing where we were on top of each other in our house, and I had to get a little space. And next door, there's a building, and this guy bought the building, and he had a theory about turning it into this retail space. The area here freaked the fuck out, and he was like, "Fine, fuck off," and he just let the building decay. It is now going to be demolished. This is now 10 or 12 years later, and I don't know. It's just. Nothing got done. Nobody won. It's a disaster. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't have like, it's not like I would say I am blanket for, preserving everything.
No, I mean, none of it's going to last. Right. But like, that's what's so interesting to me is the dichotomy of it, right? Nothing is going to last. We're all going to be gone. All our stuff's going to be gone. Everything's going to be gone. Yeah. And yet, when you were talking about the family videos, somebody a couple years ago resurfaced a video I had never seen of my father as a child. It's silent, but he's in a little rowboat in Florida. He's like maybe 8 years old. I had never seen it. My father's been dead for 12 years.
Wow.
And I pored over that thing frame by frame by frame, right? And so
That's
you can
powerful.
hold both things at the same time, right? Like, all of these negatives I'm carefully scanning and printing, they're going to be in a landfill someday. But also, those things while we're here, like, can be really, really important.
Well, I also love, though, that stuff changes over time. That there's a photo you have right now that is going to be pregnant with meaning later.
That's
because
all I
of
think about right now.
Building disappears or the person disappears or the something or the relationship changes. Like, I still love that when the thing still changes, like I just found a contact sheet the other day and I was like, holy shit, this tells me of a moment that I completely forgot. I now want to scan these negatives. Like, I still believe in the time travel that allows.
Well, and the process of it, I think, is so important. And that's why when I said earlier, like, there are more generous ways to look at those quote unquote failed projects, because I think there's so much in the act of curation and Jodie, in you actually scanning the negatives and poring over these works. And I think even if, and I think about like, we'll just all talk about our dads. That I feel like Jodie could also be our podcast. Is like my dad
There's
died
already one of those.
right before the pandemic, and I had to clean his house out, and I found all these weird little collections. He had a very small house. He did me that favor. All these weird little collections of things where I'm like, why were you collecting a horoscope magazine that came out weekly for 30 years, and I didn't even think. Like, I don't even know if you knew your star sign. Like, I don't, like, what were you doing? Or like dressers full of old tax returns that he never looked at again. And I think part of it for him probably, it wasn't that he was saving them for his daughter later. It was the act of, and I think that that's also worthwhile. And then other people have to worry about it later. So that's fine.
That's funny too. It's funny you bring up tax returns. So I'm just, because I've had that moment where I was like, I have these hard copies of like the last whatever my working adult life, and but then like you look at them and you're like, shit, it does tell a story, right?
Yeah.
Like where I was at in 1995 when I had my first job, and and how little I was making, and that is the curse,
being an artist.
There is narrative,
everything can be a source. Yeah. No, that's
so
the curse.
I have not taken them to the shredder, even though I think I'm legally allowed to ditch. What you keep 7 years or something like that, but it's still, it tells. There's a story there,
Yeah.
So
no, that's the curse. Really, is like everything could be a source for my teenage diaries are in the box in the closet, letters from boyfriends. Nobody cares about that stuff, but
I know.
It might turn into a project someday, and I have the excuse of like, well, I'm an artist. I show my work in galleries and minor museums, and so it might be a project at some point.
I feel like there's some people who've made beautiful images of archives too, literally, right? Like, is it Catherine Wagner or somebody? Who am I thinking of? Like, there's just been...
Yeah. No, I know what you're talking about. There's a lot of artists that... Taryn Simon did one with the New York Picture Collection. That was really interesting.
Oh, right. Oh, by the way, there was a guy who taught at CalArts when I was there, and I think his name was David Bunn. And he was given the entire card catalog collection from the LA Public Library, which they were transitioning to digital. He started making books of poetry, of found book titles next to each other. He started making installations of the cards they would tell stories just by the virtue of the book titles. Or there would be handwriting that told the story of a librarian who was like engaging with it. Like, again, it was like this map to this entire universe. And he was making work from that archive, which was set up in his studio for years. That was like his raw material for years and years and years. And that was that garage sale thing for me of like, oh my God, I just found an entire box of plate glass negatives that, tell this particular moment in time. I mean, found photography always drove me crazy too, because that was so fascinating. And you'd start collecting, like, I'm only going to collect images where there's a shadow. I'm only going to collect images where there's a camera in it. Or, I would start to invent these rules for myself. And anyway, it got insane. Wait, I'm going to tell one other quick one.
Yeah.
So during the pandemic, my 90-plus-year-old neighbor, lovely man named Al Goldberg, who was a therapist, he passes away. Very sad. His daughter's cleaning up the house. And I had to stop myself because she was literally going to throw it all in the dumpster. And I was like, his world is a snapshot of a working psychotherapist in Los Angeles from like 1948 to 2000 or whatever.
Yep.
And like everything told the story. The booze he had in his cabinet was like, he didn't drink, but his clients would give him alcohol each year. And it was all these aged bottles of weird Drambuie. But then like his book collection was like, also kind of this weird middle brow, like he seemed to just order like Time Life series, which told the story of like those weird reductive summaries of shit, or like, and that it was photography and Shakespeare. And it was just these like kind of almost Columbia House CD and Tape Club level mediocrity of like a library. And it was just, I don't know. I was like, I want to keep it all.
The whole thing.
And I can't. Like I had to like let it, I mean, I plucked a few things, but I couldn't resist. But yeah, I get very overwhelmed because my archive has grown to the point where it's unmanageable. So the idea of taking on another person's archive, and when I say archive, it sounds pretentious. I just literally mean like my photos, my magazines, my stuff.
No, I mean, I think about it all the time. It's like, there's a story in everything. And it's a matter of selection and curation versus trying to get everything. and that's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I'm laughing because I'm sitting here and I'm literally, there's a folder. I'm so embarrassed. I'm just going to tell you. I found a folder the other day of print obituaries that I saved.
Oh my God.
So I would when a guy would die, I would be like, oh, I have to save that. So here's Joey Ramone,
Oh my God.
New York Times obit.
Oh my God.
And I have tons of these. Here's Leo Castelli. I don't I have a ton. Rudy Buckhart, photographer and filmmaker.
Oh
my God.
If somebody was notable, I would keep their obituary.
I love that. We might be the enabling people you don't need in your life, but I'm like,
you probably don't want to be talking
it.
to us. My father saved the Daily News from the day that the Mets won the World Series in '86 until he died.
Did it have value, or it was more emotional value?
No, it was for him. Yeah. He was a lifelong Mets fan. They finally won. It was the biggest day of his life.
Yeah.
Probably
I
bigger
still
than
have
my
that
birth.
instinct.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I mean, what's so tragic now is saving concert tickets was so fun for a while, and now it's in my Apple Wallet, I have 46 sad little digital cards that I also am do I erase these?
That's a sad one for me because I'm
movie tickets,
I have all of my tickets. I have this box where I kept if I was at a big show where they with confetti cannons, I have confetti from all of those shows. I have every wristband from every club show when they still did all of that, and it's what am I doing with that? But that's if my house were burning down, I'd grab that before I grabbed my social security card and my birth certificate.
I know. I hear you.
But that conveniently brought us back to what we started by talking about, which was your children and my students, teenagers today, everything is in their phone. Mm-hmm. And I do think that they're conscious of it and they want to attach to physical things again. And I think that it's a natural human instinct to want to hold on to things.
Is that the friendship bracelets? Now that I'm thinking about it, that's the physical thing you get at a Taylor Swift show, right?
And the registering for the film photography class.
And you're trading
buying
those bracelets.
Disposable cameras,
Yep. So I mean, I think there's
the kids are all right, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, and I'm not one of those get off my lawn.
I know.
I'm trying not to be that guy, and I get that my daughter doesn't I brought her to Flipside, and she sort of enjoys it, but she doesn't roll up her sleeves and start digging because it's just not the way she sifts. She's sifting through playlists and she's getting things through search engines and through it's just not the way she listens or engages with music, but she loves music. So I see the sort of receding inevitable obsolescence of a place like Flipside. And that's why there's kind of an acceptance. It's kind of Tracy who's you gotta let it go.
Gotta let it
you know
go.
what I mean? You're not gonna save this place. He doesn't want you to save this place.
Right.
And so you gotta
she has tattooed the carpet on her arm. And so she will always have it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I kind of can't believe she's that, because that literally every day.
Yeah.
Flipside sort of passes through her consciousness.
Yeah.
So it's wild. She's amazing. She's great. I'm so glad she participated.
She seems great.
She's still fighting the good fight. She is in a band. They tour. She had an online record store. She's one of those people who organized her life around that obsession, that passion about music and the tactility of it and the sharing of it. I didn't quite do that. You know what I mean? She got bitten by the bug at Flipside and never looked back,
Yeah,
so.
But you're, just to kind of bring the point home, your film is an argument that it's never too late either. Because I spent my 20s working in advertising also. I didn't even mention that. I worked as a graphic designer until I was 29. And then I freaked the fuck out, left New York and joined AmeriCorps. So, it's, and now I'm a college professor. So
that actually though is something that I do like and did hope for about Flipside, which is that you would leave and it might provoke a little bit of, oh my God, I got to finish that thing. And the thing doesn't have to be creative or artistic. And creative is I don't love that obnoxious, it's it could be the business you wanted to start or the book you meant to write or, whatever it is, but it's the thing that you meant to do or didn't do that you can do it. And one of the things that's been funny is in Q&As sometimes, if I'll do a screening, someone will come up after and be like, oh my God, I'm a college professor and I've been meaning to write this novel, but I am always doing office hours and how did you do it? And it's almost a friend of mine was joking that, you know, you might pivot to a career being like a creative life coach because
Totally.
Right.
I do think though that there is something to that. Like I consume any podcast that's about the creative process or finishing or how the novel got written or how it got made or what. Like I love process stuff because the idea that you take this idea from your brain and this abstraction and then make it into a thing, a finished thing is still such a remarkable form of alchemy to me. You know what I mean? It still blows my mind that people 100%. Do this on a daily basis, you know?
And it also, for people that are currently like, I mean, my full-time job is teaching, but I actually really like teaching, and it's a way that actually fuels my creativity instead of blocking it. So I feel like I won. Like, I feel like I figured it out, but it's still hard. And so for people that are currently working in a creative field and being actively creative in their daily life, like I go to my studio constantly, except for now that I have had surgery, but it was almost like a good job for me. You know, it was like when you ran away from New York City, left all of your friends and didn't know what the fuck you were doing when you were 29 years old. And you were like, I can't work in advertising. This is nightmare fuel. It was the right move, you know, even though it's been hard. So
no, that's beautiful. I read I don't know, I found this article weirdly, like I wished I'd read it 40 years ago or 30 years ago, but like it was in the New York Times like a week ago, and it was about how Ken Burns has lived in the same house for the last 40 or 50 years. And what was so interesting about the story is he was in New York City and his landlord raised his rent by like $50, and it went from like 250 to 300. Like it was some minuscule amount, but he was like, I can't do this anymore. This is going to dictate my choices if I have to live this way. So he goes and buys this house in this tiny town. I think it's in New Hampshire. And this allows him freedom from that rat race. So he doesn't have to make the amount of money to pay the rent, to pay for all the expenses to live in the city. And then eventually, you know, as he gets more successful, he's able to acquire more land and he builds another barn and an extension. But it is still, this house was this defining economic choice that allowed that cleared his creative path. He could be also away from the competition and the rat race and the chaos and the noise of, you know, when you're with other creative people and you're feeling envious or, you know, whatever.
Doing the comparing.
He left it. And I just thought that was such a, like if someone had given me that advice, I don't know that I would have been bold enough to take it. I felt that real pull that like you had to be in New York or you had to be in LA.
Well, Judd called
and
you.
I don't.
You had to.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was in New York though. And I really felt like that was where life was going to happen. And I love being in New York for lots of reasons, but like, God, I mean, imagine if you had the bravery to move to like a small town in Maine and make that your creative haven. I mean, that requires an incredible also amount of self-generated motivation and showing up every day and not feeling despair. And, you know, that's a really self-directed person to be able to pull that off. But I don't know, there was something remarkable about that article where I was like, wow, had I been that bold to do that, you know, I might have saved a lot of money and time and energy. And anyway, so.
And yet you wouldn't have had the archive to pull from for this beautiful film. You know?
It's true. I also think that generationally, I think everything has changed where you could live a bohemian life in New York, even in 1991 or 89 or 93 or whatever.
Anymore.
Whereas, so I think now people, you know, are thinking about what city do you go to and where can you live and, you know, make an impact. And is that Detroit? Is that, you know, Chicago? Is it, who knows? Like, Baltimore, you know, there's like, I know people who are like doing cool things. And so I think it's
Philly, big time.
Things have changed. Philly is amazing.
Yeah.
Providence, huge. So,
yeah. And I think we're gonna let you get back to your life, but I think it's Milch at the end who says like, try to do what remains to be done to the extent the world allows it. And I feel like, what do I know? That's exactly how
There's so many lines in here where I'm just like, can I like
I'm gonna
put that
hang that
on
up in
my
my
mirror
room
in front of my
it's
so I
just
see
incredible. And then you talk about that last beat with but let's just say I could finish it. But it's not really the last beat because there are a couple of seconds of silence there. And you have this documentary that like ties up in a pretty tidy little bow but still feels open-ended in a way that I hope then when you said like, you know, hopefully it's inspiring other people and hopefully like encouraging other people to go finish the thing. You kind of leave space for that at the end. I think that's really beautiful. So
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, yeah. And by the way, it's not like it all got tied up in a bow for me. Like I'm still trying to strike this balance. I was having conversations this morning about the death of commercials and pivoting and what the fuck do we do? And, but I think you're just going to try to invent my way out of it and create, you know what I mean? And just figure out what the next thing is. Anyway.
Yeah.
Don't mean to leave on a bummer note.
No, I don't. It is a bummer, but it also is like, well, we have to figure something else out, and we will. I do.
Yeah.
I know I'm not usually the most optimistic person, but in this case, I'm
super optimistic this whole conversation.
I'm usually the Pollyanna.
But
you
I
are
do
full
think
pendulum. You're like that pendulum's coming back.
I know.
But I just genuinely, I think it has to. I really do. So we'll see if we're all still here for it, but somebody will be, I think.
Some kid will be in a basement in New Jersey making a zine about a band still. And that is hopeful.
Yeah.
That is hopeful.
Chris, such an absolute joy to talk with you.
Thank you. Thank you guys for reaching out and wanting to have a conversation and expressing your appreciation for the film. It means a lot. And this is it. This is why you do it, right? You want to be able to talk about it. You want to be able to think more deeply about the ideas and connect with people about the film itself. So thank you. This is the meaning is being made right now.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for making it, because, it could not have ticked more boxes of what I wanted to watch right now or in general.
I'm glad. I'm glad. I mean, and by the way, the trick would be, I think there's an algorithm to the film that you could apply to a lot of stuff. Like, we could go with this perspective out into the world about a lot of things. And like, could you do Flipside-ian kind of essays about other stuff? And I feel like New Jersey is this endlessly interesting resource,
Oh, yes.
source of, so I still believe that there's work to be made in and around my life in New Jersey. So
absolutely.
I hope you find another excuse to get back here and I say here, I'm in Philly.
Our spiritual homeland.
The spiritual
home. We have to get back there.
Yeah. And let us know when you are.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you.
And we will keep up on what you're up to. And
I was going to say, where's the best place? I notice you're not the most active on social media, but
which is smart.
It's good for your mental health.
Not,
but
I know it's bad. I mean, there was a point. I will tell you, just in the name of obsolescence, people were like, I was like, does anyone do when Flipside was coming out? I was like, should we do a website? And everyone was like, no. Like, nobody gives a shit about a website anymore. Like, my favorite is still Instagram. I hate to say it, but it's
on there.
Photography and looking at images and other people's images and the men making images and I post, not all the time, but like occasionally. But thank you both. You're so engaged and thoughtful. The deepness of your enthusiasm is very meaningful. I just want you to know that, because that's a very close viewing of the film. So thank you.
I told you we flipped out about it. I'm going to watch it again and again.
Yeah, our texts were in all caps.
I'm going to keep recommending it to people too.
That was a fucking delight.
What a good time.
And he says goosey night. Like, that made my whole life.
So funny. I feel like we could have ended the interview there and you would have been happy. That would have been enough for you.
That was enough. Yeah. So that was a great time.
Yeah. So thank you to Chris Wilcha. Go give him a follow over on Instagram.
Yeah.
If you watched and loved Flipside, which hopefully if you made it this far into this episode, you have watched it. And if you watched it, I think you loved it. Let him know. Because it seems like maybe word didn't get around quite as much as it should have so far for this documentary. So if we can get a few more people checking it out, that would be great.
Well, it's funny because you think about, like, we interviewed Sav, Tommy, now Chris, and all three of them are trying to put out really personal or like passion project documentaries at a time when it's really hard to get attention, distribution, things like that. So,
and at a time when I think personal stories are maybe more important than ever. Like, not to get to whatever, and you guys have been listening to us now for this episode.
Whatever. It's a question, right? Like, it's an important one to think about right now. Like, how do you stay living a creative life or a life that's meaningful to you while still surviving?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's hard.
And then next week, we've got another good one.
We're on a run. I don't know how people decided that we could interview them, but I'm glad they did. Like, that we're worth talking to, because it's been such a great, like, we had Tommy and then Sav and then Chris, and next week I am so excited. I watched this one already, I think 1.5 times. I'm probably going to watch it one more before we start. Do you want to tell them what we're watching?
Yeah, we're watching another documentary.
Another one that's very heartfelt.
Yeah, another really heartfelt, thoughtful documentary that is also warm and loving.
Yeah, and it's a story that like we haven't seen represented in a documentary before.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a documentary called We Can Be Heroes. It's directed by Karina Mia Wong, and it's another situation where you can't watch it yet, but I think it's really helpful for people making these films that are looking for distribution to get out and have these conversations and get in front of people who will be their kind of target audience. And I think our listeners will learn very quickly that they are part of the target audience for this documentary. It popped on my radar because one of the subjects, so it's a documentary about a like sleepaway LARP camp for young people in upstate New York. And the camp director is someone named Judson Packard. And I went to grad school with Judd, and Judd is lovely and funny and a great person. And the documentary is just fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah, it's incredibly sweet. It's also very beautifully shot. It's premiered at South by Southwest in March of this year, and is, I believe, currently seeking a distributor.
I think that's
Excuse
right.
my language.
And it's getting great reviews. It's not just me saying that it's great because somebody I know is in it.
It won the Audience Award at the Woodstock Film Festival. It got the Best Documentary Feature at the Nevada City Film Festival. Like it's getting really good reviews. We loved it. It just was so. I know the word sweet is kind of like it's not as emphatic or enthusiastic as I want it to be, but it just is so sweet. It's I don't know if we said this on mic. I don't think we did because we haven't really talked about this much yet, but Andrea and I, both two childless cat ladies, both immediately were like, I kind of want to have a kid right now.
Yeah,
we started watching it because the kids are so great.
I messaged Judd. I said, I'm 3 minutes into this. I'm ready to be a mother.
Yeah.
Like, it's, you know what it is? It's sweet and it's sincere, and sincerity is so, but it doesn't feel like, I hate to use this word, but sometimes things that aim for that can start to feel cringy.
Yeah, no, this lets the realism in. Like these are the kids that go to this camp a lot of them are neurodivergent. Like, and it's not, none of them are like a stereotype of something. Right. They're individual kids that, look at the world in individual ways.
And it seems like they really get to be themselves on camera in a way that I think a lot of documentaries wouldn't let kids be.
Yeah.
And so I am really excited to talk to Karina and Judd about it. I have so many questions.
I know. I keep saying I'm excited. I am excited. I'm excited to watch it again before we talk to them too. So I'm sorry that it's not something that you can watch right now, but it's a documentary, so it's kind of hard to spoil. So come listen to our conversation, and then, let's root for them to get sort of more of a wide release.
And I said something similar about Flipside, but if you connect with the conversation next week and it sounds like something you'll want to watch, which it should be, let people know, make some noise about it online. And
yes.
So you want to let folks know.
Wait, before we do.
Yes.
I found one really great quote about it.
Okay.
From The Stranger, the publication. It says, it lands somewhere between Game of Thrones and Glee on a watchability scale, which, yes, is a compliment.
That's so funny.
Isn't it great? Okay. Anyway. They can find us at WatchersPodandJ on Instagram, and they can email us at watcherspodandj@gmail.com.
I'm at AQAndreaQ on Instagram.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't say my own. And I'm and I'm Jodie_Mim, also on Instagram, JODIE_MIM. And we will see you next week in the woods.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll see you next week. Wait, what is it called again? We'll see you at the last green.
Very good.
We'll see you at the last green. Yeah.
You guys will get that eventually.
Yeah.